Good morning, afternoon, evening for you all that are joining us in our session at Darren Cities. Our whole hope right now is to have the audience that can be engaged in the process of thinking about climate, but most of us think about our action regarding the climate emergency that we are facing. Today, we're going to continue and to make our final panel of this afternoon in Bonn. Our panel, Making Climate Justice a Reality, a people-centered response to climate emergency. This is a continued action that we have been talking since our opening yesterday. Our interest today is most of us to continue this conversation, to make and continue to have Darren Cities as an opportunity for a continued conversation regarding action. And when we are talking about our own capabilities, we want to ask you, to invite you to join us in this whole community that want to be not only committed, but want to be committed toward action. My name is Rodrigo Corradi. I'm the Deputy Executive Secretary for equitably in our South American office. I send my warm regard from São Paulo. And this whole section, this whole hour that we're going to be here, we want to make you a part of this conversation. We're going to have a full group of people that we're going to join us, fantastic speakers that are going to help us out with this concept of conversation, trying to identify all over the world the capabilities that the local government has to not only conceive process, but to implement procedures that are actually engaging people in the climate emergency. Towards all history, human settlements has been the center of action towards humans. We have been engaging in different emergencies, and we identify that our whole capability is to try to identify the best way that we can move this together. When we are facing climate emergency, our concept is that if we only deal with the capabilities that technically scientists were going to show us, the economic urgency that we're going to face, if we don't think about how people on the borders in the cities are actually being treated by when we have the situation that people that most need in the whole unequal system that we have all around the world. And I can say, talking from Latin America, the most unequal continent towards urban settlements. If we don't see the capabilities that we have, taking advantage of the emergence that we have to face opportunities to change people's lives, we are going to miss not only a generation opportunity to tackle inequality, but we're going to also have missed our obligation trying to identify the way in which people could be in the center of the solution that the climate emergence presents upon us. That's going to be our main challenge of this session, to try to see from our lens the way that we are able to get people in the center of the solution, not only be identified as part of the problem. With this in mind, I'd like to introduce our panel. We're going to have Tina Volker, Head of Unity at the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Innovation, Digitalization and Energy at the state of North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. We're going to have Chilando Tankala, Mayor of the city of Lusaka in Zambia. We're going to have Julian Boscan, Principal Advisor at Cities Alliance. We'll have Shannon Miller, Historical Preservation Director and co-chair at the City of San Antonio in USA of the Climate Heritage Network of North America. We'll have Emilio Hatton, Mayor of the Municipality of Santa Fe in Argentina, Yanuela Histani, Deputy Mayor of City of Tirana in Albania. And we're going to be joined by Aida Mishra, Local Pathways Fellows at the UN Sustainability Development Solutions Network at the Youth Initiative, to help us out to have this conversation. We're going to have for you a question that we really would love you to join us through the Zoom facility that we have right now. We're going to have this question open for the whole session, and we'd love to have you to be part of this conversation, to join us, and to support this this question. The question is, what are the key elements of effective people-centered climate action for you? If you could, for sure, to help us with the capabilities to present your own thoughts and experience from your territory, we're going to be for our benefit. We're going to be preserved in our archives and be disseminated by the climate. So, to continue this conversation and to have this local perspective being taught, I'd like to ask Tina to join us and to help us out with her experience in North Rhine-Westphalia and how you are dealing with this matter in the local government perspective. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, because I think I cannot be seen. I have severe internet problems, so sorry in advance for anything that happens. If you could share my slides, and I hope I can see them. Yeah, fantastic. So thank you very much for having me here this afternoon. I'm very happy to share some insights on the ACE Hub project with you, a cooperation between UNFCCC and the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. Next slide, please. Just a few facts on what NRW is. So we are a federal state of Germany located in the heart of Europe. You can see that here in the center. Düsseldorf is our capital. We have borders with the Netherlands and with Belgium. We have about 18 million inhabitants, and we are actually Germany's powerhouse. So 30% of national power production is being generated in North Rhine-Westphalia. We have a huge and really large hub for heavy industry, steel, chemicals, paper. And this adding up, this comes together to about 30% of Germany's greenhouse gas emissions as well. So we really have quite a task regarding climate. However, we have embarked on our climate journey. We have a Climate Protection Act for several years already, and we have set new targets last year, minus 65% emission reduction by 2030, minus 88% by 2040, and climate neutrality by 2045, which equals actually the climate targets of the federal government. Next slide, please. Our main work, of course, is within the borders and boundaries of North Rhine-Westphalia, but we also have some international climate activities because we really believe that it is super, super important to exchange with other people around the globe who work on the same issues, who need to tackle the same challenges and need to find solutions for these challenges. So we focus on peer learning within the Under2 coalition, where we are a member of. 270 regions with strong climate commitments gather there really for this peer learning. This is one of the focuses or the strong focuses of the coalition. And this is also why we found it so appealing really when we had the chance to discuss with UNFCCC to finance the ACE Hub project. So Action for Climate Empowerment is the overall umbrella over this ACE Hub as well. This is a work stream of UNFCCC. North Rhine-Westphalia is not involved in that work stream, but we can contribute a tiny little bit now through this ACE Hub. And ACE is education, training, public awareness, public participation, public access. And with the ACE Hub, we try to support also UNFCCC in spreading the word of the importance of this work stream. Next slide, please. So the project is set for 3 years, and we financed this pilot phase of ACE Hub with about 1 million euros. It is some sort of a climate academy located in Bonn, North Rhine-Westphalia, which is really run by UNFCCC, and North Rhine-Westphalia comes in as a partner. We have developed various education and collaboration formats focusing on different target groups. And we do capacity building, public awareness, and fostering of participation in climate action in these. So one focus is on ACE focal points. That really is a work stream that UNFCCC does on its own. And we're focusing on youth, which is why we found it really interesting to work in that project. So we have a ACE Youth Exchange every year where people from North Rhine-Westphalia can meet international youth people, or young people, to work on skill sets for climate action, how to get involved, how really be an advocate for climate. And we have hackathons where the same target group comes together to work on specific climate problems. So last week we had our first hackathon in Bonn, where the problem statement came from a North Rhine-Westphalian municipality and circled around the participation or the involvement of citizens in the local energy transition. Next slide, please. So these are the really 2 main target groups, ACE focal points and youth. But what we also do together with UNFCCC is really spread the word on ACE and the ACE Hub through networking receptions in 2022. So we had a reception at the SBs in Bonn. In May this year, we will have a reception at COP27. And we had an event at Climate Week where we really tried to advocate for ACE as a work stream itself. Next slide, please. For us as a subnational state, it is of course a great thing really to cooperate with UNFCCC, for us ourselves to understand more about the processes, the needs, and how they work, how they engage also with other stakeholders, non-party stakeholders. As I said, we find ACE important as a work stream, and we do a lot in this respect in North Rhine-Westphalia, but now with this project, we can also contribute to an international process. We can bring youth from North Rhine-Westphalia into this, which we find really valuable. And we can also showcase our own climate action on an international level, which is also, of course, a very, very interesting thing about this project for us. 5 minutes is really short, but I hope I stayed in the time scope. And that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you for sharing ACE Hub experience with us. We know how from a local government perspective, to be interacting in such a global prospect as you were doing is for our benefit, for us, for sure. And thank you so much for sharing all the perspectives that you have presented in 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on in our presentation, I would like to ask my colleagues to support with the presentation of Mayor Chilando that will help us to understand a little bit about the good practice of youth engagement in Lusaka, in Zambia.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, we are here attending the ICLA World Conference to share knowledge and also to learn from our other colleagues what they've been doing to fight climate change and just involving the communities or a particular group to fight climate change or take part in all other decision making at local governance. So for me in Lusaka, what I've done is that obviously I am fighting climate change in different angles, but I have tried to work with the youths by introducing what we're calling a junior council. And this junior council comprises of a mayor, a deputy mayor, and all councillors, the 38 councillors for each wards in my city. So each young youth has got what we call a senior councillor who was voted by the people, and they work together. So this way, it means that I involve the youths, to keep the city clean. So they take part in what we call Keep Lusaka Clean campaign, sweeping and cleaning up the drainages every last Saturday of the month. And also they take part in the tree planting that the mayor's office is doing. So in all these things, I also expect the junior council to give us feedback that they get from the communities. And this makes it easier for sensitization in the communities, and also feedback that the bigger council, that's myself and the councillors, can also implement. What we found that is very important for us when we're making policies, it's best to do it bottom up. And when I say bottom up, I mean you engage the communities first, elevate it to local governance, and then elevate it to central government. In that way, everybody feels that they are part of the decision making. And this goes all around, whether it's in climate change, decision making, or just working with the communities to improve, or make sure that whatever policies we're making are sustainable for our city. Yeah.
Great to have the opportunity to have the words of Mayor Chilano in such a hands-on approach that she's been leading in her municipality. And to moving on for our next speaker, I'd like to invite Shannon to be part of our conversation. We know as co-chair at Climate Heritage Network in North America, and Shannon, you have been engaging in the whole perspective of cultural heritage and climate emergency in the local ground. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Yes, thank you, and I'm happy to be with you all this morning or afternoon, depending on where people are watching from. We know that the climate emergency calls for an ambitious vision for how cultural policy can empower people to imagine and realize low carbon, just, climate resilient futures and achieve climate resilient sustainable development. We at the Climate Heritage Network are eager to work to unlock that power of culture, including arts and heritage organizations, to enable transformative action. Just last week, the Climate Heritage Network launched an ambitious 2022 to 2024 action plan, which you can find on our website at climateheritage.org. Both the new CHN action plan and the CHN's Race to Resilience emphasize the nexus between culture and heritage, climate action, and justice. The Race to Resilience Culture Initiative recognizes that resilience has kind of three key components: the capacity to transform, capacity to persist, and capacity to adapt. And for the purpose of those Race to Resilience initiatives, culture-based programs and projects that strengthen elements of resilience are considered as key strategies. So one important example of those elements is equity and justice, which includes how widely capabilities are distributed within our cities. Culture-based approaches can address gender considerations, social roles, and resource use, sharing, and management, and then also, of course, political and economic relations and legal institutions. So this element also speaks to cultural rights and approaches rooted in human rights and mobilization of values that support justice and inclusion. The CHN will, of course, continue to monitor and refine the types of programs that it will credit as culture-based strategies and for making people more resilient. Additionally, the Climate Heritage Network has partnered to prepare a Culture for Climate Agenda document that will be presented as part of the UCLG Congress next week. And that builds upon previous works, such as the Future of Our Past report, to demonstrate how cities are uniquely positioned to advance climate action through culture by strengthening resilience and promoting inclusivity. This, of course, requires partnerships between local and regional governments, civil society, and other stakeholders to design new models of management, of capacity building, information sharing, and access to finance. And really underscores the need for a diverse set of partners and for formally embedding climate change planning in the work of our local communities and into our regional climate plans. with the rest of my time, I'd like to provide just a practical example of some of our climate action planning through cultural heritage that's happening in San Antonio, Texas. We have been focused on developing a robust circular economy with cultural heritage at the center. And I'm just going to touch very briefly on two key initiatives. The first is our Living Heritage Trades Academy. We know from studies that half or more of traditional tradespeople are over the age of 45. And so with those retirements looming, there's a shortage of skilled and experienced contractors who have experience working with historic building materials and who understand the importance of maintaining unique local characteristics in our communities. And so rebuilding this pool of traditional trade practitioners increases access to affordable alternatives to building removal and reuse of building material. In a related initiative, our city council just last month in September, adopted a deconstruction ordinance that requires that when older and historic residential buildings are approved for removal, that they must be deconstructed rather than mechanically demolished. When we talk about this initiative, we use an organ donor mentality. If a structure cannot be saved intact, then its parts and pieces, of course, can help extend the life of another historic structure, or hopefully many historic structures. And there are so many social, cultural, and economic and environmental benefits gained by choosing to remove structures in a different way. There's more jobs, more material that's locally available to repair buildings affordably. And also it's important from the perspective of retaining cultural and material heritage and reducing emissions associated with landfilling. We also believe that the material itself has inherent cultural value. And so deconstruction really also minimizes the kind of violence in a way associated with traditional demolition. And it's especially important from a heritage perspective for communities that view the loss of a building as a really significant social or cultural loss. And so reclaiming those materials, we have numerous opportunities for truly localized economic activity, including salvage material reuse and workforce development. And so through these initiatives, we have an opportunity for waste diversion, for workforce development, for pre-disaster mitigation or disaster recovery by stockpiling those important materials, and also by extending the life of affordable housing in our community, which are often older and historic buildings. And so that's just one example of how the city of San Antonio has kind of incorporated circular economy and heritage into our climate action and adaptation planning.
Thank you, Shannon, so much. It's always remarkable when we are able to see a hands-on approach and something that some people could think that's so far away from climate planning, and that could be that had the center of focus on people's engagement with their own heritage. And the way that you're presenting was great. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And to continue our conversation, I'd love to ask for Julien Vascon, Principal Advisor for Cities Alliance, to share with us the perspective of climate emergency action, the experience of Cities Alliance, especially in the rapidly urbanizing cities and vulnerable groups. Hello, Julien.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I wonder if the slides can be put up. So I'm going to be talking very specifically about the poorest in the world, mainly with African examples. Countries where the cities are characterized by local authorities with something like 25% of the skills they're required to manage the city of that size, where upwards of 75% of the population live in informal settlements, and 90% of jobs are to be found in the informal economy. Next slide. So we can change slide. All right, so the key point I want to make up front is that there's no parachuting the climate emergency into the poorest cities of the world without doing a considerable amount of basic investment upfront. And that is in building up the institutional arrangements, building up the capacities of communities in these cities to be active partners with local government. This can take years. Susan Lyons has been working in many, many cities around Africa and has invested considerable investments in building up organizations of the urban poor who can take control of their slums, who are involved in participatory planning, who work in partnership with local government and with national government, and who are involved in mobilizing resources through their own savings, through savings groups. So the point is, we have to bring the climate emergency to the local level on the back of active citizenship. And to have active citizenship, you have to invest in making that happen. Next. This has an institutional shape. In all the countries in which we work, we put together an institutional frame where in every one of the informal settlements, there will be a settlement forum. And the objective of the settlement forum is really to do a slum upgrading plan for that settlement and to start designing and looking into the needs for community infrastructure at the local level. Also, we have in every city a municipal stakeholder forum that looks at the long-term city development strategies of the city, that also looks at land expansion planning, which is really an endeavor to use what limited planning capacity there is at the local level to ensure that people don't settle in the wrong places, to make sure that people settle in the right places. And lastly, we set up a national urban forum with the objective of putting in place the national urban policy that enables cities then to provide the type of service delivery that's required to meet the climate crisis. But the very first thing we have to do is to make sure that people settle in the right places as the first step towards resilience. What is happening in many parts of Africa, the cities are growing very rapidly, and there is no plan in place other than those 2 service sites that get planned for. So people look for any land to settle on to give them access to the city. We have to control that and make sure that people settle at least in places where they won't be most affected by the climate emergency. Next slide. So I'm going to race through this. This also has other aspects that these forums I spoke about enable the oversight of infrastructure, much needed infrastructure that's beginning to occur in these cities, and they can make sure it's oversighted in a way that this infrastructure is actually built to the high quality and is not part of a corrupt process or underinvested in. They can also be engaged in the type of technology choices that communities have to make at the local level. So it's both being part of the institutional partnership, but also being on the ground to oversight and monitor what needs to happen. Next slide. Now, within that frame and structure of the climate emergency, we already have communities who understand that their long-term prognosis is not good, given climate change, given sea level rise, etc. And instead of being forced, as would normally happen in many, many cases in the African context, to force relocations, they themselves are taking the initiative through these forums, through the municipal forums and through the national forums, to negotiate the terms and conditions under which they will relocate to safer land that will enable them over time to be better positioned to deal with the climate emergency. So the idea of forced removals disappears and we get into negotiated voluntary relocations where they are necessary. Next. Now, in most of these cities, there are multiple crises, and the idea of the climate crisis, something that's emerging now, we can say, but also in the future, it has to be part and parcel of the existing crises. It can't be an additional crisis. It has to be part of the response. And there are essentially 2 huge things that have to happen, and the climate crisis has to relate to these. The first is that there needs to be massive investments in the huge backlogs of services that are required in these cities, in sanitation, in water, in drainage. But there also needs to be upfront planning to make sure that we don't just have informal settlements occurring on the worst lands possible, but we also start to plan for the long-term future of rapid urbanization. And the point being, if these 2 challenges are not met, the challenge of existing slums and the challenge of stopping future slums, then we're simply going to have cities that are crippled by informality and are characterized by this ever-growing urban sprawl. So when we look at the need to invest, next slide. When we look at the need to look at the backlogs and future urbanization, this is the opportunity to start looking at the climate emergency infrastructure. The infrastructure is not there. So the new generation of infrastructure that's coming in now has to be tailored and climate proofed. It has to be able to respond to the climate emergency. The question of climate has to become part and parcel of the infrastructure that's being put into African cities as we speak. And these and African cities must focus on supporting investments in urban nature-based solutions and in inclusive and green development. And this is already happening. But it's not only about the climate emergency. We're looking at actually cities that are taking shape, cities that are growing very rapidly, but are still to be formed in many ways. So we also need to be looking at other issues, such as how do we make cities far more friendly to women and youth? At the moment, as they develop informally, they're becoming increasingly unfriendly to women. And the question of how do we make cities more gender friendly is a key issue as well. And then another issue, for example, is that by far the majority of people in African cities walk. Is their principal form of transport, yet the cities are completely unwalkable. And so the point is, when we're planning for the emergency, climate emergency, we can't do it in isolation of the other challenges that are taking place in African cities. And we need to find a way in which all this integrates into a new vision of the African city and start to say the future of the African city incorporates the climate emergency, incorporates gender, and incorporates new ways of looking at the structure and making them more walkable. Next. The other point is we also need to move away from the idea that infrastructure has to be huge infrastructure and has to be delivered by some form of international tender and big delivery companies. We need to start looking at the informal economy to see how we can work with the informal economy to provide services at a better quality and cheaper price. We need to be working with local NGOs to see how community-based infrastructure can be part of the solution. And we need to be looking at public-private partnerships, etc. The point being, we need to be working with communities in the delivery of infrastructure rather than providing services to communities. And to do that, we also need to have, next slide. And to do that, we also need to have new mechanisms for funding small infrastructure projects. We need to have available to communities upgrading funds that they can draw on so that they can start to identify their priorities through their settlement forums and then access the funds to build small infrastructure projects. And throughout Africa, through these community upgrading funds, more and more you're finding projects being built, but these projects are already, because there's such a trust in these systems, such a trust in the forums, because they're built up people from their own communities who are talking about climate change, so they believe the message of climate change. So it's not only coming from outside talking about climate change, it's coming from within, and therefore the small projects that are being built by communities themselves are being built with a very strong understanding of the impact of climate change and the need to future-proof whatever infrastructure that is built. Next slide. Then finally, in all our projects, we understand that many informal settlements are built on the least protected land, and the least protected land is often the most environmentally sensitive land. And so informal settlers are often seen as the enemy of the environment. And what we've done very consciously is to work with the urban poor to make them the champions of the natural environment, turn that whole thing around, and to ensure, working through schools, working through the various forums I spoke about, to make sure that they understand the importance of eco-services, to make sure they understand the importance of wetlands, and why it's in their advantage to protect them and maintain them as they plan for the longer term development of the city. I think I'll stop there. That was my 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Julian, for your perspective, your experience, and to present all the problems that when we talk about emergencies, when you're dealing in cities that have so much needs and have that many that we don't have to pile different experience, but actually to use the experience of climate emergence to support the continued fight against inequality. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And to continue our conversation of this afternoon, I would like to invite Ayadit Mishra, Local Pathways Fellow in 2022 cohort at the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, the Youth Initiative, to join us and to bring us its perspective for youth engagement.
Hello, thank you for having me here. I would like to start. Can you hear me well? Because it's the Shara season in India.
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have many municipalities and people like the ones over here that are trying to embrace the aspect of urban sustainability and consolidating multiple actors to fight against climate change. And we often see these very ambitious goals stemming from the importance of even framing of the issue as an emergency that elevates the response plus the consciousness of the people. And of course, it requires time, effort, and most importantly, the resources required to be addressed, which isn't the same for all the regions. And when we talk about Asia Pacific or even the global South, we're essentially clumping up a diverse network of people, causes, issues, and approaches that need to, again, not be in a single set and cannot be judged with the same frame, and is one of the key challenges that we tackle in our work. I would say this is the same for India, one of such diverse countries where cities require massive amounts of practice, quick responses, and even well thought out actions to even reach the masses before anything can be enacted. So my team has majorly been working in Mumbai, a coastal metropolitan with, again, complex dynamics of infrastructure, the governance systems, and citizenry. The devastation mainly of 2005 that left the city flooded for more than 24 hours, with the darkest nights that followed, sparked the making of the climate action plan here and many other mandates which were previously stagnant. We have seen local actors, indigenous groups, especially the Koli community, which is again a fisherman community, come forward with the initiatives and a renewed force of youth as well. We have had participatory meetings to amend the master plan proposals, but massive amounts of engagement with the laymen, the vulnerable groups, and in all wards couldn't really be managed so well. That is again something we as urban practitioners are working on. Only last month, we saw the launch of Youth Project, which the indigenous communities of the Western Coast, where they cleaned about 500 kgs of plastic waste a day with native techniques such as fishermen nets, where again, these opened avenues for the government to come in and support such actions as well. We have had Parisa educating and empowering people to take action for their blocks. We have Amchi and Marba project as well, led by students and local actors working on aspects of water, C&D management waste as well, which I think one of my colleagues also said so. And again, we see impact in various scales through these waste action groups led by youth. So through my engagement with the SDSN, my team and I have been working on a cohesive consumption and mobility plan to integrate climate action into the informal economy as they appear in the urban fabric of Mumbai. This again involves a lot of on-ground surveys, interacting and explaining to people about our ideas, and then also gathering their inputs and working on the problems together as well as a cohesive unit. So you have to dedicate yourself to the whole gentry, and it's been about a 2-year-long process. And so we face some of the challenges that municipalities and different government bodies tackle every day when dealing with such large-scale problems and in massive spaces as well, which include, but again, aren't limited to the measuring, the quantifying, analyzing of local indigenous beliefs and data as well for various issues of planning, and again, integrating the climate change aspects to a future forward analysis. But again, we don't have climate education or even the understanding of the issues to a good extent yet. And the third one is, of course, the limitations of resources, capacities, and the will to work itself. So we often see the demands and the public interest being raised here on the issues of biodiversity and climate change, you name it. And we have a lot of obstacles to overcome when it comes to the eventual implementations and the local level as well as the global level, which is something youth, again, a lot of different organizations that are also working on. Although we have seen a lot of opportunities to grow and evolve, notably the establishment of the youth office, more partnerships and more funding opportunities for the global South, of course, Yongo's work, and again, equitably, and the multiple organizations that support us and that give us the opportunity to engage in platforms just this one. But there is still a lot more to come, which is something that I have also discovered with my work. Well, the role we youth play is being that main trigger in the need for change and getting these new ideas into motion to push for inclusion across these different levels and to be actors in this change, working together because in the end, we make our own government system. I think that's my time. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Heidi, and thank you for to bring such elements and especially the pace that youth organizations are providing for finding solutions and to find not only the most complex solutions, but the simple one that are able to make more relevance at the territory. Thank you so much for being with us and continue our conversation. I would like to invite Anwar Histani, Deputy Mayor of the city of Tirana in Albania, to join us and to bring us your experience in local ground. Thank you, Anwar.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be here and really talk about what everybody says affects cities, and cities are the main polluters. But oftentimes we confuse the fact that, yes, cities do contain most of the people, but most of the time they're not responsible for what we then have to face. So for those of you who are working in public administration and local administration, we are the ones that will have to 100% face what's happening in terms of our day-to-day lives, although we are not nearly 100% responsible for what has been going on. Tirana is the European Capital of Youth for the whole 2022. And for those of you who still haven't sent their youth activists in the city, you should. You still have a few more weeks until the year is over, until we pass the baton to the next city. But what has been going on, because this was a platform for all young people, this year, to really display what they thought about their future and what they thought about what's going on in the world. And it's ironic that we care so much about involving young people in climate action, where in fact, young people are the only ones that actually get it, other than the rest of the population, the rest of us. So ironically, we push them a lot, but what we should be doing is not necessarily getting them involved. Instead, is more of giving them a platform of what could be a good idea, what could be new ideas. And I do stress to say, in all my years of local governance, this is mostly about facing the threats of what climate change is presenting to cities, because that is the reality now. So there is, unfortunately, very little, and I don't want to be negative here, but very little of what we can do to reverse what has been going on as cities. And do please challenge me if I'm wrong, but there is a lot that we could do to mitigate those threats, and that is something that we don't have a choice on. That's not a luxury, that is not optional. This is day-to-day reality. When I was a little girl in Tirana, we used to have rain from October until April. Now we've gone up to 200 days without any sort of rain. And when the rain happens, it's usually very violent. It destroys crops, it creates floods, flash floods. And then in the summer, when then you have drought because of those terrain changes, then you have high risk to fires, to wildfires and so on. And I think this is not unique to where we live. This is not unique to the Mediterranean. This is what is happening everywhere around the world. So what we're doing with our young kids is to get them prepared. And in a city where we've endured major earthquakes in the last years, in addition to the pandemic, of course, we have created not just the youth council for the city, where these kids decide on what is good and what is bad for the city from their perspective, but we've also created our climate council. So we have a climate council, which not by chance is made up mostly by young activists, although we never set a age limit there, where these kids get together and they display avant-garde ideas on, like, for example, creating a database on green businesses, or simple actions that the city can take that do not require necessarily a change of legislation in the national level, but they can be replicable and adaptable to all cities, such as, for example, adopting a green fleet for the city vehicles, or promoting businesses who actually change their fleets from fuel cars to electric ones. We have basically removed all on-street parking from the main city center and transform those spaces to bike lanes. We're promoting that. In all businesses, in all institutions, there are now bike parking lots instead of car parking lots. And that is increasing day to day. And that is oftentimes an action of these kids' guerrilla interventions, where they basically occupy the space with their own bikes and with their own roller blades or roller skates, and transform that space into a pedestrian or bikeable area. So in addition to what city does, as a measure of administration, as a measure of how we envision and how we want the city to become, is the participation of those of us who are going to make the most use of those changes, and that is usually the young people. So this year has been great to displaying this sort of initiatives, and has coincided with a lot of challenges in the industry world and in the energy world, where it just so happens that everything we've been blurbing about with sustainable development and sustainable transport now does translate into very actual and factual measures that everybody now has to take, no matter what they believe and where they stand in the spectrum of climate change. So lots of things that have been going on, from tree planting to massive cleaning to flood preventions, to pedestrianizing full areas, to the car-free days. Lots of these things have been happening, but I'm sure that they happen all around us, so it's not really specific. But I really want to leave you with the feel that we do not need to push young people into our agendas. We need to be pushed by the young people's agenda on how they view the world and how they want to build a safer world, not a better one, because we're already past that, than the one they're living now when it comes to climate threats. Thank you, everybody. Let's get this done as much as we can.
Thank you, Anuela, for the actually engaging speech of how we are able to be supportive and to actually to create possibilities for youth, for the youth to lead this next steps that we need to move ahead. Thank you so much for the experience of Tirana in this subject. And for our final presentation, I'd like to ask for a video insertion of Mayor Emilio Hatton of the city of Santa Fe in Argentina, that we're gonna try to identify for us his perspectives of its city's engagement regarding the way in which we are able to tackle inequality in a way connected to climate action.
Hola, mis amigos del mundo. Gracias por la invitación. Soy Emilio Hatton, alcalde de la ciudad de Santa Fe en la República Argentina. Santa Fe es la cuarta ciudad más grande de la Argentina, con una extensión de 268 kilómetros cuadrados y una superficie urbanizada de 80 kilómetros cuadrados, donde viven alrededor de 430.000 personas. Se ubica en el centro este del país, en la confluencia de los ríos Paraná y Salado, con condiciones naturales excepcionales. La relación con el agua define su identidad. Tiene un amplio borde costero de acceso público que es ampliamente disfrutado por la ciudadanía y una reserva natural urbana que abarca 2 reservorios de agua pluvial que disminuyen el riesgo de inundaciones en la zona oeste de la ciudad. Como muchas ciudades del mundo, Santa Fe vive una situación de fragmentación social y urbana que se ha profundizado en las últimas décadas. Las áreas del sur y centro cuentan con infraestructura urbana que tiene buena calidad, buena oferta de transporte, está conectado y una amplia red de espacios públicos consolidados. También acceso a bienes culturales, espacios verdes, plazas y costas, servicios educativos de calidad y un entramado económico productivo basado principalmente en el comercio y los servicios. Por otro lado, las áreas del norte y oeste se caracterizan por marcadas carencias básicas como acceso al agua segura, a las redes de gas y a un sistema de transporte público integrado y eficiente. Tienen un ámbito mayormente degradado y en ella han proliferado los asentamientos informales como viviendas de baja calidad constructiva. Estas comunidades concentran una gran proporción de población joven y familias numerosas con bajos niveles de alfabetización, informalidad laboral y altos niveles de desempleo. Llevamos adelante aquí en esta ciudad, para cambiar toda esta situación que estamos planteando, un plan que denominamos Integrar Santa Fe, y nuestra política, emblema que atiende los desafíos de la ciudad, y sus acciones se vinculan directamente con la justicia climática y con la relación con la gente. Buscamos mejorar la cobertura y calidad de los servicios públicos en los barrios más postergados y reconstruir los lazos comunitarios, fortalecer las redes de cuidado y aumentar la participación de los ciudadanos en las decisiones de desarrollo de la ciudad. Tal como afirma la Organización de Naciones Unidas, el cambio climático nos afecta a todos, pero sus consecuencias acrecientan las brechas entre ricos y pobres, hombres y mujeres, jóvenes y adultos, mayores, afectando de manera más profunda a las poblaciones más vulnerables. La justicia climática es una cuestión de derechos humanos fundamentales. Una forma de asegurarlos es profundizar la democracia de proximidad, crear espacios de diálogo, participación y escucha entre municipio y la ciudadanía, entre los gobiernos locales y la gente. Fortalecer la participación comunitaria es uno de los desafíos de sostenibilidad de Santa Fe y parte de nuestro aporte al compromiso de Malmo. Lo hacemos empoderando a la ciudadanía y a sus instituciones, creando y promoviendo redes en cada barrio para que las acciones que llevamos adelante se centren en las personas y en mejorar su calidad de vida. Más de 300 organizaciones, tanto públicas como privadas, organizaciones barriales y líderes comunitarios provenientes de 42 barrios de la ciudad forman parte de estas redes. Durante este año 2022 hemos priorizado la iluminación, el transporte, la inclusión, la prevención de la violencia y también los cuidados. También promovemos mesas de diálogo sectoriales como espacios que nos permiten resolver con la ciudadanía diversas problemáticas sociales y urbanas, como la movilidad, la gestión de la infraestructura y los servicios básicos, el hábitat y los espacios públicos. El compromiso de las instituciones locales es un activo fundamental. Ellas nos permiten generar los acuerdos y consensos para avanzar hacia una Santa Fe más humana, más integrada y más sostenible. En Santa Fe estamos convencidos que es necesario pasar de la mera democracia representativa a la democracia de proximidad. La democracia de proximidad es el profundo reconocimiento del otro, en todos los sentidos que a ustedes se les parezca, en el sentido más profundo de igualdad, en el sentido más profundo de integración y justicia social. Santa Fe marcha hacia el futuro por ese camino. Muchas gracias. Les dejo un abrazo.
Thank you for the support of the city of Santa Fe, a city in which I already had the pleasure to be in more than a couple of occasions, that really translates lots of what the mayor has emphasized to us. And with the Mayor Hatton speech, I believe that we conclude our sequence of fantastic presentation that we had during this hour. If you allow me, I'd like to make a few considerations before our closing. I would like to not only thank, but to demonstrate my admiration for the experience that here were presented. But furthermore, I'd like to make this to emphasize a few points. I believe that one of the more relevant one were emphasized in different talks was the relevant and central point of youth as the move forward. It must not be only a pitch line or engagement. It must be a central part of our climate agenda, and to tackle inequality without talking about the youth opportunities that we're going to present in this climate emergence reality is to miss, not only to miss a point, is to be completely outside of our main objectives moving forward. This connection between climate justice and human rights, I believe that this was emphasized in different experience, but I really can assure that my perception is that this idea is really well translated in the concept that climate emergency is connected to other emergencies that we already face in an equal world. And especially when we're talking about the city reality that we are facing, we need to make the necessary bridges between climate emergency and inequality emergence that we already face. The connection with the youth, but thinking about how inequality is already damaging realities around the world. That when we are facing more than 1 billion people that are not eating enough to sustain themselves every day, when we face this reality, we need to understand that the largest and more comprehensive crisis in our generation has to be one crisis, a crisis emergency that deals with inequality. And I really thank so much for all the experience that we have been presented in this section. I also would like to ask for my colleagues of the petition to share with us the result of the question that we have presented in the beginning of our section. What are the key elements of effective people-centered climate action? And we can see here inclusiveness as the most relevant wording that was presented from you, but also intangible heritage that was well presented by our US experience, this section, the connection with youth empowerment, the connection with active participation, all in every single experience that we have seen here, the relationship that we need to have with active participation was emphasized, and gender perspectives also point out, not only in English. And thank you so much for presenting yourself in your own language here as well. All those elements, I believe that we can talk about inclusiveness. We can talk about the perspective of feminism in this correlation that was so well presented by different experiences here as the necessary moving forward from the session. I thank you so much for all your engagement, all the engagement of the speakers, all of you that were part of the answering of our question, to be with us in this platform, and to be able to see this those experiences that were presented here by video, to be with us at various cities. We are in a full 5 days experience to try to engage towards action, and this is what we are being so proud to advance in our whole network that eClay has the opportunity to be in, and in opportunities like Daring Cities to try to engage our whole community of organizations, and especially cities and the ones that engage in the city to try to make the change that is so necessary. Thank you so much for the eClay team that is producing all those activities. Johanna, Patricia, thank you so much for the supportive action. And we continue our actions in more 3 days of Daring Cities. Have a really good morning, afternoon, or evening.